Our next guest is with Funker Tactical, and they've been getting some attention after releasing online videos like this.
Instructor comes in, and first thing they tell you to do is focus on the sights, squeeze the trigger, pin the trigger to the rear, only release the trigger and try to relax. It's all As a rule, the first thing you should learn how to do is pull the trigger without moving the gun. You don't even need to load the gun, you don't need a target. You need to be able to fire the gun without altering the attitude and the direction the gun's pointed. Until you can do that, aiming is meaningless. Think about it, if you're shooting a shot, you're focused on that front sight. You're looking at that front sight. You're looking, and you say, no, I'm going to shoot now. And you jerk the gun 6 inches low, 8 inches low. It didn't matter if you aimed to begin with. So it's pointless to focus on aiming until fire control is in place.
It's my pleasure to welcome Daniel Shaw. What's going on, man?
Hey, man, good to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, anytime. So before we get into the video, let's talk.
Hey, you better mean that.
Hey, come on, man. First tell us a little bit about Funker Tactical for people who aren't too familiar with it.
You know, interesting. Funker, I've only been a part of Funker for about 3 years. And, you know, we have a lot of names and faces on there that people normally recognize. We're known for kind of edgy videos in the firearms industry. We try to be a little bit outside of the staying boring, standing there, just talking 3 different cameras, you know, takes forever to shoot.
Yeah.
A bit more movement, a bit more action type stuff, and get across a good, strong message. We're actually in a transition period that I'm really excited about. We're going to be we're going to start something that you're going to start seeing rolling out here within the next 6 months. That is going to be something that I think the whole industry is going to be excited about, but it's going to be for the end users 100%. And you know, we're going to keep doing what we do, our core competency, making good videos. But you know, that's my main thing I do in life is I'm a teacher, I'm a trainer. I just happen to do some video work and some things on the side to reach more people with Funker.
Awesome. So how long have you been in the training world?
Well, in the military, I'm a retired Marine infantryman. Was teaching there for many years, almost 20 years. I actually retired at 16 and a half. They started off an early retirement, and I jumped on it. That was in 13, and I've been out here teaching in the civilian world to law enforcement, occasional military, and responsible armed citizens since then.
Awesome. So let's jump into the video. What was the catalyst or the genesis behind the idea for the video?
You know, it was just that was Paulo, or GN, people know him as on the internet. He's he was just there with Rob Latham, and he's like, hey, tell me about this thing you were just talking about with aiming. And then Rob went into that. Rob and I actually did a video for Springfield out at Media Day because we were having a conversation, and Rob told us, guys, get the cameras. We're going to record this. He's been on my podcast, and we talked about it. Him and I agree a lot on this whole thing. And your intro that says a trainer that teaches his students not to aim is not entirely accurate.
Yeah, it's actually not accurate at all.
But no, it's good. It's a good catch, and it makes sense for what we're doing. The reason people miss, Colion, the reason people are shooting a handgun, they don't hit what they're aiming at. It's not because they didn't have the front sight perfectly in focus. It's not because it wasn't in the rear sight. It wasn't breathing. It's because they pressed a 5-pound trigger with 17.5 pounds of pressure or 27.5 pounds of pressure, and they made the gun move before the gun went bang. That's why they missed the target. So aiming is useless if we don't have a proper trigger press, because it doesn't matter if you're aiming the gun perfectly. If you're going to disturb that at the most crucial point, who cares what you did in the aiming process? It doesn't matter. The gun doesn't care.
Yeah, no, I've learned that the hard way after many years of trial and error. I used to be obsessed with sight picture. I used to worry about, oh shit, clear front sight. You hear that, yeah, right? You hear clear front sight all day long. And it wasn't until actually as of recent that I started understanding how important trigger control and trigger press is in terms of being accurate with a firearm. And another thing that I noted in that video was especially the distinction between shooting fast and shooting accurately. If I'm going to shoot bullseye, it's going to be I'm actually a totally different discipline, but nonetheless, it's going to be a different train of thought and focus than I am if I'm going to be running 3 still plates in under a certain time. So,
right.
So when you engage in the training that you engage in, how do you go about communicating the importance of trigger control from this perspective?
I teach defense, and that's where I live. That's my lane. That's what I stay in. I compete every once in a while, and a lot of the things cross over from what I teach into competition, and I take things from competition into what I teach. And those things are very important, so they go hand in hand. And in both of those, whether it's reality-based combat with a handgun, fighting another person that I need to stop a threat, or if it's winning a competition, I want to be fast and accurate. The reasons for the penalties for not being fast and accurate are less severe in the competition world than they are in the real world. In the real world, I might could be really, really fast, but if I'm not accurate, I'm endangering people around me. It's my responsibility to be accurate. It's my responsibility to put bullets in the people who deserve them and protect. I need to be lethal for that bad guy, but safe for everybody else around him. I need to be able to put them down quickly or stop that threat as fast as possible. If it's the point where I'm using deadly force and that's my only option, then I need to turn that violence to 11. I need to get those impacts. Every miss is more time they have to hurt other people. So I want to be fast and accurate. A trigger press doesn't care how fast you press the trigger. The gun doesn't care. It's I need to press this trigger. And people use the term, I heard it all the time in the Marine Corps growing up, slow, steady squeeze straight to the rear. There's in a defensive situation, there's little time for anything slow and steady. Right. I need a press. If it's a 5-pound trigger, I need a 5-pound press without moving the gun instantly. I need to apply 5 pounds of pressure. Now, the way that I learn what 5 pounds of pressure is, I can't take my finger and put it on my digital scale here. Apply, okay, now this is the Glock 17. It's got a 5-pound trigger. You know what? It's 4.6 because I dropped that ZEV kit in. I don't have that ability. So what I have to do is I've got to learn that. I've got to develop that mechanical memory. I've got to take up that slide. I've got to get to that wall, and I've got to build pressure until that gun breaks. And then I'm recording that. I'm putting that in a file folder in my head that when I pick up my HEK VP9, that I know that this is the amount of pressure it takes to make my gun go bang. And then when I see that my gun is pointed where it needs to be pointed, I apply that pressure. And I do that without moving the gun, without disturbing the gun. Now, that sounds really easy to say.
Yeah.
We're having to fight our nervous system, our whole body that wants us to move that gun down when we fire. And moving the gun down isn't a bad thing if it's in the right sequence. If it's as the gun's recoiling, I'm fighting to get realignment, then it's a good time to do that. But when the trigger is going to the rear, it is a ungood time to do it.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on instinctive shooting?
So this is fun. This could be really interesting. So there's a lot of folks who say instinctive shooting. They'll say intuitive shooting. They'll use terms like point shooting, Applegate and Fairbairn's old stuff. And there's a lot of misconception about all that. I teach people a few different sighting techniques. I teach a hard sight focus. That's your traditional, and I hate even using that word. Front sight blade focus, center of the rear sight notch. When it's on the target, press the shot. I teach a target focus. I'm 3 yards, maybe 5 yards. I got a good clean backstop, brick wall standing in front of, whatever. I may be able to use a target focus. I don't need to use my sights. I just index or kinesthetically align my body on that target. I still have to have a good trigger press. I still just can't jerk and move that gun because I mess up that body alignment. We still have alignment. We're still pointing. We're still aiming. We're just using different ways to observe the aiming process, using our body and body alignment. So that's the target focus shooting. I also use a soft sight focus. You know anybody who's who wears bifocals or trifocals?
I know a couple people.
Yeah, you probably go shoot with them and watch them as they're trying to align their sights, and they shoot, and they're always trying to find. They're trying to find the lane to look through in their glasses to find their sights. For those people and people with vision going bad and wearing bifocals and trifocals, I use the same technique that I use when I'm shooting a handgun at 100 yards, at 200 yards, whatever I'm doing. And I use a target focus with a soft sight focus. I call it a soft sight focus, where I'm focused on my target, but I align a blurry front sight inside of a blurry rear sight. And then I press my shot. So I'm not focused on the sights at all. Everybody from Jeff Cooper and Chesty Puller and everybody else would roll over in their grave. But I can stand there at 100 yards and ding these targets and not focus on my front sight one time. Focus on the target because it's hard for me to focus on, get those sights aligned and hold it on the target at that distance. And those bifocals and trifocals, they find that they don't have to figure out which lane to look through as their gun moves and they're on their sights. They just focus on the target and they align 3 blurry points and they get good precision hits.
Yep. I absolutely agree. I think it also it parallels what you talked about with respect to poundage and the pressure that you put on the trigger. If it's a 5-pound trigger pull, that's the amount of pressure you put on it, and then you kind of store it in your mental faculty in the sense of, okay, I remember how that feels, I note it, and then that's what I'm going to try to mimic. I think the same could be said about instinctive, intuitive point shooting, whatever the case you may call it. You know, it's kind of like, you know, my body does something in a specific way when I'm aiming at a certain thing. And then I think that's where kind of like repetition comes into play in that respect. Could be wrong, but my personal experience, that's kind of how things landed for me.
In classes, I see the shooters who are more successful with the target focus, with the body alignment, kinesthetic alignment, whatever you want to call it. The ones that are more successful are the ones who have drawn that gun and pressed that gun out to alignment, to perfect shots the most times.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I always talk about in my class Schrodinger's cat. So are your sights aligned even when you're not observing them being aligned? Do you have to actually observe your sights being aligned for them to be aligned?
Yeah.
Have you ever presented your gun to the target and saw that your sights were aligned immediately? I'm sure you have. Did you have to see those aligned, or could you have just pressed the trigger before observing those aligned? Yeah. I believe you could have pressed the trigger before observing those being aligned, and that's all you're doing by this body alignment and kinesthetic alignment. Your gun is pointed where it needs to be. You don't have to actually observe with your eyes sight alignment.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you very much, Daniel, for basically dropping the knowledge bomb on us here today on the show.
I don't know about that.
And I need to go ahead and correct, of course, he teaches people how to actually aim.
Just using a few different non-traditional techniques, right?
Exactly. But no, man, it was definitely a pleasure having you on the show. Look forward to having you back on the show. Look forward to joining you on your show as well. So thank you very much, Daniel.
Yeah. I look forward to having you. And that's www.gunfightercast.com. Had to throw in the shaver's plug. If you want to hear more on my podcast, call it Gunfightercast. It's on all the podcatchers, and I'd love to have you on sometime and talk to you.
Absolutely. Will do. All right.
Thanks
a lot, Daniel. When we come back, Olympic shooter Gabby Franco and I are going to talk about Venezuela and the government gun grabs.